All right, so looks like we are recording. So what's going on, you guys? I'm Hunter with Raw Wolf Machine Works here in front of the zebra wall, but with a guest that one. Okay, with a guest this time. Shit. Did the same exact thing on the last one. But I'm here with Josh. We're just talking a little bit on a little something different today. Just an honest conversation about post-traumatic stress, your experience in the Battle of Ramadi, your experience in the whole GWOT as a whole, and I'm like Brent. I like just talking to people who have experienced these things, because I think it's our job to just kind of to remember that stuff, the good and the bad. So we're just going to have a conversation about the good, the bad, and the unfiltered just thoughts about the whole global war on terror, your experience with it, and the context in today's day and age. So why don't you tell my subscribers a little bit, my 230 subscribers, a little bit about yourself, where you come from, and why we're having this conversation.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I'm Josh. My channel is Modern Frontiersman, as everybody can see. It's a channel on preparedness, self-reliance in general, the pew-pew stuff, as well as the gardening and the not-so-sexy stuff.
Hey, don't you say gardening isn't sexy, okay?
Yeah, it doesn't get the views that tactical training does.
Okay, I guess that part's probably right.
Yeah, but so my like I was saying before my before we lost signal, this is take two, but so I grew up in rural North Alabama. I grew up in the Mormon church, which I'm no longer a member of now, but they have they're really big on preparedness. So growing up in that church and in the Boy Scout troop in the church, that probably had a lot to do with influencing the way I am today. And like I said before, that's not a bad thing. I'm grateful for that part of it. And but like I think I was saying before I cut out last time, I had a scholarship. I was going to have a music scholarship because I was in band and I played drums, and I was a drum captain for basically the entire time I was in middle school and high school, marching band and everything. So I was probably going to it was looking like I was going to get a music scholarship, but I had gained a interest in the military when I was in high school, which, I always had an interest in it, and I always loved watching war movies, and I kind of just had a great respect for the old World War II veterans that would come around to school on Veterans Day and give their speeches and all that stuff. And I just saw myself as like I wanted to go out, and I saw myself going out and defending the country and fighting for the country and all that hoorah stuff. And so I remember I was going to school while I was in high school. Like every week, I would check out every book it's like a set of books of every branch of the military, and I would check them all out. I would read them all. Then I would return them all on Monday and check them out immediately again and read them all again. Like I would just do this over and over and over again. Like for years, I did this. I just always had all these books in my backpack from the library, and something kept always bringing me back to the Marine Corps. Especially reading about the battles in the Pacific with the Marine Raiders, and with the battles like Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, Macon Atoll, all these things that in these battles that tend to be forgotten, and overshadowed by the Europeans. Huh?
The ghost of Chesty must have gotten you.
Yeah. So
whispering in your ear.
That's right. Yeah, he was, and but it's a shame, I think I talked about that in the video I did on the Raiders. A lot of times those battles that the Marines fought in the Pacific, they get overshadowed by the battles in Europe, when the Marines fought some really gruesome battles during that time, and that fascinated me, the amphibious aspect of the Marine Corps, the fact that the Marine Corps had longer boot camp and, harder training and higher standards and all that. And I was like, you know what, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go in the branch that has the highest standards. And then my cousin, I guess I was in about 10th grade. He went in the Marine Corps. And when he come back and I saw how much he had changed, how different he looked and the culture that he had absorbed, and the after all the indoctrination and everything, that solidified it. I was like, I'm going to be a Marine. That's what I'm doing for sure now. So about 2 days. 2 days after 2 days after high school graduation, I went to Paris Island and became a Marine. And they gave me a bunch of options, of course. They wanted me to, really think about it. And all I wanted to do was be a rifleman. I just kept saying rifleman. They're like, well, you gotta pick 3 things in case you can't be a rifleman. And
okay, hang
so I was
on.
like, okay.
I don't think they'd ever told anybody no on being a rifleman.
No, they never do. I think it's just a paperwork thing. You just have to have 3 different choices. So I think I chose like rifleman, mortarman, or like machine gunner, which are all still infantry MOSs.
Yep.
And they were like, okay.
Damn, dude,
and
okay.
They laughed. And so, yeah, I ended up being a rifleman, 0311, and went to 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines. Did training for like 6 months. And then, and I don't know how long it was, probably from the time I went to boot camp until the time we stepped foot in Iraq wasn't very long. It was 7-8 months, so.
And what year did you join?
At that time? 2005.
Okay.
Yeah, May 2005. So I joined, yeah. And then that next year, January 2006, we were stepping foot on Iraqi soil.
Damn. Quite the change,
yeah. Oh yeah.
So what kind of things? Because you said you were from rural Alabama, so I got a couple of questions. One of which, I've traveled all over the country doing mission work, and one of the places I went to was West Virginia, and in West Virginia, in that part of the South, you have 3 options, and that's dig coal, sell dope, or join the military. Did that have anything to do with your decision, or was it always something you were driven to do? I mean, you already talked about checking out the library books, but was there something culturally, like in the Deep South, about joining the military too?
No, not really for me. I mean, I guess my uncle was in the Navy. My great grandfather, he was in the Navy as well. He was actually in the Pacific during World War II. He was there at Iwo Jima. And then I had another uncle that was in the Army. My great great uncle was in the Army as well during World War II. I had a lot of family members that was in the military, but they really didn't have any. That didn't really have any influence. I'm kind of always been kind of one like I'll just do what I feel like I need to do, regardless of how anybody else feels about it, or or anything like that. I just felt really driven to do it, and especially like with 9/11, I guess solidified it too, because like everybody else at the time, I remember. I was in 9th grade at the time. I remember sitting in art class, and teacher turned on the TV, and I remember seeing all that stuff, and that drove me even more to want to go into the military. We'll get further into that later, but I drank the Kool-Aid like everybody else.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why you and I get along so well, and why we have such fruitful conversations. Because I'm going to get this right out there. I did not serve a day in the military. I never ever claimed to. Like, I am a civilian through and through, but I did. This doesn't mean shit to anybody, but it was. I know the drive, because I had the same thing. It's like, yeah, I had a grandpa who fought in World War II. My mom's side of the family was big in the military. I had 2 great uncles. One flew a B-17 and one flew a P-38 Lightning. One was over Italy, and then the other was in the Pacific. And then grandma was she was a teletypist, but because women weren't allowed in the military in any aspect, so she wanted to do her bit too. So that's what she ended up doing. And that's why I have a tattoo of a P-51 Mustang shooting down a Zero. That was her favorite plane. So I get I get the always having a drive. It's just I got medically disqualified, and every single time I tried to join the military, I kept getting told no. Even getting a letter from an allergist saying I don't have the allergy anymore, and the Navy was just like, no, you had an allergy, it's a no go. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I get the drive. But on the same subject as my last question, how much of a culture shock was it? Just from, rural Alabama to, let's say, just to boot camp, was that much of a shock?
Yes.
Well, I know Marine Corps boot camp is supposed to be, right?
Yes, Marine Corps boot camp is a major culture shock. That is probably, that's the biggest thing that I'd say. What's the words? The Marine Corps, just to put it in perspective, even in amongst the branches of the military, the Marine Corps has a very distinct and different culture from the rest of the military, and a very different culture from the, civilian world for sure. So yeah, it was a huge culture shock. You can't understand a word Marine drill instructors are saying, I watched the difference in the word usage and the jargon and even the accent, you know what I mean? Like you have this accents from all over the country molded into one new accent, and you can't understand a word, and they're screaming, like they're just like, you hear drill instructors, they're just talking so fast and they're only speaking like the first half of every word. So it's when you first get there, you're so confused and discombobulated. You have no idea what they're saying. And it's just so aggressive and so in your face. You know what I mean? That's a big culture shock, especially for a kid that grew up in in the Mormon church and in a fairly quiet area, you know what I mean, and in
right.
This that was a huge culture shock for sure. When everything is kill
Yeah.
Yeah,
this is different from literally everything I've ever known.
yeah because all my family, everybody was pretty quiet, laid back, humble, you know what I mean? Like we don't want to, don't want to hurt nobody or offend nobody, not weak, but just meek, you know what I'm saying?
It's just a thing,
Yeah. So it was way different.
Did you get a lot of support at home on your decision?
A lot. My mom, she didn't want to, I went in the delayed entry program when I was 17. So my mom didn't want to. I wanted to have that full year in the delayed entry program to spend with the recruiters and, PT, and they do a lot of, and people don't know that in Marine Corps boot camp, it's not very much combat type training. It's more indoctrination. So there's a lot of Marine Corps history, a lot of, just drilling stuff into your head. So that's a good thing in the delayed entry program in the Marine Corps is they go ahead and instill all that Marine Corps history and those customs and courtesies and start getting you acclimatized to that culture. So it was good. I told my mom, that I wanted to have that full year in the delayed entry program. So I feel like I was mentally ready. She didn't want me to, but she eventually signed the paperwork. She was sitting there and she cried and she's like, I'm just so afraid you're going to come home in a box. She's like, but I know this is what you're going to do when you turn 18 anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and sign the papers and let you do it because it's not going to stop you either way. And I said, that's right. And she said, and you're probably going to end up in Iraq or Afghanistan. And I said, probably. Yeah, real quick.
Yeah, you were not wrong on that. And I don't think there's ever been a mother in history that's just like, yeah, go join the infantry, I just think that's a mom thing.
Yeah. So I was like, I had a lot of support. Like even before I graduated high school, everybody knew I was going in the Marine Corps. Like as soon as I went to the late entry program, I was getting a ton of support. I was running home from school every day because I just lived down back roads, and like I could pretty much go about a mile down the road and then cut off into the woods and come up through our land. As I had we lived on 200 acres and only 3 miles from my school. So just run a mile down the road and then through the woods the rest of the way. So I was running to and from school through the woods with my backpack and, trying to get in shape. And trying to memorize all this Marine Corps history and stuff. And but I had a lot of support from my band director at the time, from my parents, from all of my family, my mom, like even the local news. I was only like one of like two people who went in the military in my graduating class, and I was the only one that went, or two or three, and I was the only one that went in the Marine Corps and within several years. And you know, right before we went to Iraq, the local news station even come and interviewed me. You know, they asked a lot of questions I couldn't answer because of OPSEC stuff, but
Right.
you know, they knew there was a big push into Fallujah, into Al Anbar province at the time. So they were really interested in, you know, hey, what's going on? What are you going to be doing? And this and this and that.
I
But
don't even know what
it was
country I'm
interesting.
going to, dog.
Yeah. I mean, I did at this point when they were asking, but I couldn't. I mean, all I could say is somewhere in Iraq. That's about all I could tell them. And what are you going to be doing? Locating, closing with, and destroying the enemy.
Hell yeah. It's the most vague, matter of fact, like, that's it. I like that.
Yeah.
So how would you describe yourself as a person before versus after boot camp? Did anything change about like your way of thinking? Just with boot camp? We'll get into Iraq in just a second, but just one last question about boot.
Yeah, it did. I was always, and still am in a lot of ways, I was always a very sort of introverted, shy, quiet person. Kind of, and I still kind of identify with like the, you know, like the, and I talk about it in my videos sometimes, that old ancient Chinese Taoist way of being, Wu Wei, just kind of going with the flow, you know, like that's kind of how I always, and people ran over me a lot, and I was, cause I just, you know, let stuff go. It bothered, you know, things bothered me sometimes, but I didn't engage. Always very non-confrontational, you know. I just wanted everybody to get along. And after boot camp, I was a bit more, I mean, I was still that way, but it gave me a bit more of a backbone. You know, I'd stand up for myself more, and I wouldn't, if somebody was insulting me or something like that, I would have something to say back, you know what I mean? And I wasn't afraid of to, you know, stand up. And I've never been in a full-fledged fight, like outside of the Marine Corps. I've never been in a fight in my entire life, because I was always able, that was a good thing about me being the way I was. I was just able to just de-escalate stuff and just, you know, whatever, you know.
That's the best way to
your
be,
problem,
too.
not mine. Yeah, there's only like one occasion where I kicked a dude in the throat, and that was the end of that. But
usually is.
And but after boot camp, I was a bit more aggressive, a bit more, and I wouldn't say in a bad way, perhaps in a good way. You know, that might have been an improvement of my character, being able to, you know, like, hey, you know, back off. I will tear your face off. You know?
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
I've had a similar experience just in because I grew up a church. I was a church kid too, so it's like you know, you and I are very similar in that aspect. Where I didn't discover confidence until I left home for a while, and I went to Germany actually, and I just didn't have the chaos of my home life to worry about for a bit, and I was actually able to be like, oh, okay, so this is actually what I'm like, free of outside influence, you know. So how just to kind of reiterate, because my short-term memory is basically non-existent, how long did it take from end of boot camp to your flight to Iraq?
Jennifer, let's see, May 2005, I went to boot camp. That's 3 months. Then to the School of Infantry, then training, and then January of 2006, we went to Iraq.
Now, same question about culture shock and your experience just getting off the plane, or like even and some of my other friends who I've talked to, like even the plane ride into Iraq was an experience in and of itself. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Now the funny thing is, growing up, my grandpa, he was really, he loved National Geographic and travel and world religions, world history and stuff like that. So he got me subscription along with his, like a dual subscription type deal to National Geographic. So to this day, I got all the ones when he died. He was only 47. He died from leukemia when I was younger. But I got all his National Geographics plus mine. I have like 750 National Geographics. So I was always constantly reading about, religions and history and different cultures and places around the world. And that always fascinated me. Indiana Jones, the Mummy. Like I was really interested in exploration and seeing the world and learning as much as I could about different cultures. However, reading about things and then going and experiencing them for yourself is quite different. And we had these I thought we had a good understanding of Islam. I thought we had a good understanding of Arab culture from the little briefings that we got. And then I realized that stuff wasn't even scratching the surface. That was coming from people that didn't even understand what they were teaching us. They didn't understand it themselves. And I realized that very quickly, spending so much time with the Iraqi army later on, once we got into Ramadi. But when we flew into Kuwait, I remember when just seeing the ocean. Now I don't remember if we stopped in Germany or we stopped in Ireland on the way. One of the two was on the way and the other one was on the way back. I don't remember which was which, but we didn't leave they had like the sections of the airport closed off. So we couldn't even communicate, we didn't have any contact with people in Ireland or in Germany. So that was nothing, we just got off and had breakfast and got back on the plane. So got to experience pretty much nothing in those two countries. But I remember seeing the ocean and then seeing the coast of Kuwait and seeing the skyline of Kuwait City. And I hadn't spent too much time in any cities, beforehand, other than Birmingham here in Alabama and then Atlanta, and I had spent some time in Chicago for about a week and New York for about a week. But Kuwait was, it was like when I first saw it, I remember thinking like, whoa, like it was kind of like awe-inspiring looking across that city of Kuwait City, because obviously the buildings look a little different. Of course, you have your normal, modern buildings as well, but they just look different. That kind of stucco, like sandy look, and this, like, I remember when we were landing though, like this, I don't think it wasn't a sandstorm, but I guess the wind was just blowing a lot and everything just looked real smoky and dusty, you know what I mean? But then we got down we landed in Kuwait at the airport, and Kuwait City was like really nice. Like it wasn't what I was expecting of the Middle East. I had this, idea that it was just a bunch of huts and extreme poverty, and I was dead wrong.
Yep.
So yeah, then we
huge cities here.
yeah. So I remember we got on a bus and we just drove all willy-nilly through Kuwait City out to this base. And we spent, I don't even remember what the name of that place was, but we spent a short time there. Still hadn't interacted with any Arabs other than the bus driver. And I remember he had the little, the Arab music playing and stuff like that. And that was my very first experience of another culture, really. But I liked it. I like Arab music.
Clearly like your smokes.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And so, yeah, we got to whatever that base was where we just waited. I don't remember going to sleep or anything. I think we just stayed the night there, and everybody was wide awake because, we don't know exactly when we're flying into the city or what's going on, So we hop on helicopters and I fell asleep, and then when we woke up, which I don't know if you want me to stop right there, if you have anything further to ask about culture shock, but when I woke up, we saw the skyline of our Ramadi.
I don't really have anything to ask, but that's a perfect segue into cross the border into Iraq.
Yeah. So we got on this. We got on these helicopters, and so like I said, we fell asleep. I fell asleep, and like I said, I hadn't no real culture shock yet from that because I hadn't dealt with anybody yet, other than just just the looks of the city and things like that. But I remember being cold because we're flying. There's no windows on these helicopters and no door, back door or anything. And I remember being cold and we're flying across open desert. You can't really, it's at night. We always fly at night, no lights, you know what I mean? Everything's blacked out, but I could see the sand, just like dunes just for days and just open desert. And that's what I thought Iraq was, just like most Americans do. It's just desert, right? It's just open desert. Yeah, it's just endless desert, and a bunch of mud huts. That's it.
Yeah.
And yeah, was I wrong about that again?
Yeah.
So I remember I start seeing lights in the distance, and I look, and I was like, I remember somebody saying, "There it is. There's Ramadi," and you see like the skyline of the buildings and all the street lights and everything. I was like, "Oh, yeah, this is a city."
They have power? What the fuck?
Yeah, and a very densely populated city at that. So we the helicopters start to drop down like a little lower over top of the buildings, and you start seeing fires lighting up in the streets. I think they're burning tires and stuff like you see, like in Black Hawk Down and stuff like that. Like the Americans are coming. And so you see it. Yeah. So then once we start, as closer we got to the city, you start seeing tracers come up from the rooftops.
Already.
At the helicopters. Oh yeah, yeah. So you see machine gun fire, you see tracers, lighting up the sky, coming up at all of our. I don't know how many helos there were, because couldn't see them. Enough to carry our whole company. So that means probably a platoon per probably about 5 helicopters or so, and start seeing tracers, and that door gunner, he whips that gun around, starts lighting those rooftops up, and he's like, yeah.
The standard Full Metal Jacket type shit.
Yeah.
Get some.
So everybody woke up real quick, and and some people are throwing up, there's puke, running down the floor, going out the back of the helicopter, and I sit up and I kind of
Saving Private Ryan right now.
yeah, pretty much. But in the sky at night.
Still full of 18-year-olds that have no fucking idea what's going on.
Right. It kind of felt like, you've seen Band of Brothers.
Yeah.
Have you seen Band of Brothers? When they're flying in, that's kind of what it felt like, except not that extreme. Like it wasn't ripping our helicopters apart.
Right. They don't have enough ammo to do that, but still.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, this is after the initial invasion, far after it. So there's no anti-aircraft, guns shooting at us or anything. It's like RPKs and RPGs and stuff,
At least they took out all the KPVs and the rockets before you got there.
Yeah. But later on, we had, I think, a bigger problem than a worse enemy to face than the Iraqi army, at that in Saddam at the time. But I remember. I remember these tracers flying up at us, and I kind of just adjust myself. I pick my rifle up and just kind of, I don't know what to do. I'm just sitting there waiting, for somebody to tell me to do something. And I remember my squad leader was sitting beside me, and he yells something at me, and you can't hear. Those helicopters are so loud, you can't hear nothing. And he pats me on top of my helmet, and he leans over and he's like, "Congratulations, you're a combat veteran."
That is some straight up like Full Metal Jacket shit right there.
Yeah, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like I'm 18 years old or 19 at this time. We haven't even touched the ground yet, and we're already taking and returning fire.
Yep.
Because that's how you get a combat action ribbon. You have to take and return fire, and we'd already done that before we even touched the ground.
Wow.
So
that was your first experience in Iraq.
Yes, yeah. So that was the. So before we even set foot on Iraqi soil, I already had a combat action ribbon.
Nice.
So I don't remember landing. Oh, sorry, my son's.
No,
son,
it's all good.
go upstairs, buddy. Go. Get upstairs. What? Okay. Why are you telling me that? Go to bed.
Kids, man.
Daddy, I gotta poop.
I wouldn't get it, but
yeah. He literally just said, "Daddy, I gotta poop."
Hell yeah, brother.
It's like, well, go poop. Go. What are you doing? Get out of here. Go upstairs. Yeah, you're the only person in here. Go upstairs. I love you too, buddy. Good night. You have a good night too. Go to sleep. Okay.
That was one of the greatest interactions I think I've seen all day, honestly, just in general. I have to poop. Okay. I do the same thing to people at work too, so.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I don't remember landing. I don't remember anything else from that night. I don't remember anything else till the next day from that point.
Really? Was it just because you were so tired, or?
That, and it's just so long ago, I guess. You know what I mean?
Fair enough.
You know, the major things stick out. And even to this day, I can't remember things that happened in high school. Like everything's kind of vague before Iraq. It's like kind of like those major memories just overrode everything else.
Right.
I remember like big events in Iraq, and I can't remember little details from before. But I do remember the next day clearly, because we get up and I still don't know if we went to sleep. I think we still didn't sleep, but I remember the sun coming up because I remember seeing the sunrise and seeing a lot of smoke in the sky, and remember hearing the call to prayer for the first time, which was it's kind of hard to explain. Like I found it to be beautiful on one hand.
That is the thing that I've heard. Like, that is the one word that everybody I've talked to has mentioned the call to prayer. And that is the first word that they always mention. Like, no shit. This is like probably the sixth person I've met that describes it as first thing beautiful.
Really? I figured people said the opposite.
No,
but,
none of them have said the opposite except my friend Gannon. He was, oh my God, he's an amazing storyteller, and I wish he's moving today, so he didn't get a chance to come on. But God, I wish, because he has a story about how he opens it up. He was just like, so we were at this little tiny patrol base made out of sandbags, and we were smoking hash. And we were just both baked out of our minds, and the sun was starting to come up, and we were looking directly at this sunrise. And as soon as the sun peeked up over the horizon, the call to prayer came. And the person on the microphone had like the most beautiful voice and like sang the whole thing. And he remembers, like, the one major thing he remembers is that first time he saw the sunrise with the call to prayer, and he was like, man, this is just a truly beautiful moment. And then the next day they're at the same little base, and they're watching the sun come up, and the call to prayer comes over the intercom, and he hears Mahalash. The guy's like literally coughing into the mic during this call to prayer. No,
That's
it
funny.
depends on who's singing it, I guess, on whether or not you get it described as beautiful. But thank God the first one was like truly an experience worth remembering.
Yeah, yeah. But it's like on one hand it was beautiful, then on the other hand it was kind of terrifying too, because it was, you know, like the first sound of another culture, and you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching Black Hawk Down and you know all that stuff, so like a lot of different things come to mind, you know, and so and
That's always
especially
been
not
like
knowing it.
the sunrise before the battle, and you hear the call to prayer during that transition in the movie. That's
Yeah.
that's what the call to prayer has been associated with in American culture. So I totally get why it would be kind of ominous too.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and or it was at that time, the first time I heard it, but but I remember there's like this long dirt road coming. We were on Camp Ramadi, and we were going over to our base across the Euphrates, which is Camp Blue Diamond, which is also where Randall was at that same time. He was there already before we were, but I remember this long road and then the gate at the end, and we're way back and looking down at this gate that goes out into the city, and to see I can see the top of a mosque outside where the you know, and where the call to prayer is coming from, and it's like so loud, and all of a sudden we just hear boom as the trucks are pulling in, and this big mushroom cloud comes up, and I was like, oh, okay, we're about to go out there. And hear a bunch of machine gun fire.
Is this real?
Definitely,
Holy shit.
yeah, hear a bunch of you know, Soviet machine gun fire, and then of course the 50 cals in response, and so we hop in the trucks. We were riding at that time in high backs, which are open on top, so there's no armor on you know, covering the backs, and we go out, and we went over, no issues. We went over to Camp Blue Diamond. We got settled in, and then we just like acclimatized for like a couple weeks before going out on missions and stuff. And that was when I really kind of first saw Iraqi soldiers and first started kind of communicating with Iraqi people, like with the Iraqi army that was on Camp Blue Diamond, as well as the civilians working there. And it's interesting. I guess it was really the first time I'd ever heard the Arabic language, and you know what I mean. Like I say,
That's
it can
they
really
don't even use
experience
like a Latin alphabet. Everything's foreign. It's like they don't even use the same alphabet. Holy shit.
Yeah, but I remember sitting. I remember that night, and it was so hot. You know, it was just that dry oven heat, and but I remember sitting on the roof of our house that first night, and the sun was going down, and man, it was beautiful. Like it was so beautiful, because I was sitting there in our house, like just sitting up on this hill right next to the Euphrates. So there's like palm trees and, you know, grass and stuff in there around the water. And on the outside of our base was like a little palm grove, like a little forest, and real green and lush. And that's when we're right there on the river. And so the Euphrates is running by. I see all the buildings and all the domes of the mosque, and the sun's down behind all this. You know what I mean? I just see these mosques and the minarets and everything sticking up, listening to that call to prayer once again, you know, as that would have been that should have been the fourth call to prayer for that day, because then there'd be another one at like 9 o'clock at night. But that one, remember sitting on that roof, looking out across the city, looking at the water, and hearing that call to prayer, like, and I can literally say, like, it was almost like a tear come to my eye, because I thought, I am sitting in the cradle of civilization. This is Mesopotamia, you know, like,
yeah, that had to be a crazy
this
thought.
is, you know, like that's the first thing I thought, like, this is amazing. And I thought to myself, I was like, that at that point, it's like I kind of tapped into my, you know, knowledge seeking, you know, exploration kind of self. Was like, while I'm here, I'm going to learn as much about this place as I possibly can.
You and I are a lot alike.
Yeah. So yeah, I set that in my mind. Like, right off the bat, first night there. I was like, I am going to talk to these people as much as possible. I'm going to learn everything I can about their culture, their language, this place, everything. So
what was your first experience, like your first impression of the Iraqi people? What was that like?
Well, just dealing with the Iraqi army at first, I didn't really get much from them because it was just kind of in hello and passing and stuff like that. But our very first mission, when we first stepped foot outside the gates and went into an Iraqi household, that's the first time I really, spent any time with them. And I remember a corpsman told me, he's like, hey, throw some candy in your pockets before we go out. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, it'll go a long way with the kids and the families and stuff. A lot of them had been there already, been to Fallujah and been Haditha and been to several places. But so I did. And we hopped on trucks. It's like middle of the night. We rode out to this house, and we get out of the trucks and we go in. I don't even remember what we were doing. I think it was just a presence patrol. And we go into this house, and the houses were nothing like I expected. It was this huge mansion, this giant foyer with stairs going around each side with a huge chandelier in the middle. And we go in, and there's like 6-7 kids, I guess, and in the living room. And they're sitting there and they have a TV, in the Middle East, like there's, they have the like mats or couch, like couch cushions basically lined all the way around the room. It's typical Arab design. It's, there's nothing usually in the middle. It's all around or lined around the outside walls. And over against one of the walls is a TV. And these kids are sitting there with a Nintendo playing Mario, just a normal.
I know that.
Yeah, it's just a normal household after dinner and a normal afternoon, and I was kind of thrown off because I was like, it was just kind of like, well, just normal people,
Yeah,
like I don't know what I was expecting. Yeah,
like you always get some sort of weird expectation in your head, and then it's just like, oh, they're just trying to do their thing, huh? Aren't we all, I guess? Huh, damn.
Exactly. Yeah. So it turns out like the dad was like some sort of scientist or something, and the mom was an English teacher at a high school, and pretty well off family. And I gave the kids some candy. They're like, thank you, mister. Thank you. And they're shaking my hand. They're pumped. And I sit there and just watched them play Mario for we were in there for about an hour or two, I guess. And I just sit there and watched them play Mario while the interpreter did his thing and whatever they were doing. I don't even remember. And then we come out, and I thought, well, that was a pleasant experience. For my first interaction with Iraqi people. Then we our truck had got stuck in the mud. That was because the sewers were leaking in the streets. So it got stuck in the street, and they had got the truck out while we were in the house. But as I walked out the door, from where the truck was sitting, boom, this massive explosion. I mean, huge. It picked me up off my feet. And I remember I fell down, and my ears were ringing. All the street lights, all the lights in the house went out, all the windows shattered, and glass flew in my face. And there was an artillery shell buried right where that truck was. And fortunately, we got off and went in the house, but it detonated when we came out. And very first mission, get blown off my feet. But I remember our company gunnery comes up.
Was that your first actual Was that your first actual combat? I'm not talking just receiving fire and returning it on the helicopter on the way in, but.
Yeah, that was the first one. Yeah, first mission, and that was the first, I guess, attack like that. Yep. so I remember our company gunny comes out and he grabs me by the back of my flak jacket, and he's big, huge black dude. I mean, his arms barely fit in his uniform, and he grabs me and picks me up with one hand and stands me back on my feet. And, and he's like, "You okay, Marine?" His voice sounded really muffled, but I knew it was him. And I was like, "Yes, Gunny." And I like trying to clear my ears out and stuff. And I took my goggles off, and I never wore those goggles again because they got immediately like fogged up and scratched up. And so I took my goggles off, and I just seen just dust and smoke everywhere. And I turned around, looked at the house, all the windows missing, all the power out. I remember just thinking, I hope the family was okay. And so it was like, all right, we're not going back out that gate. Get over the wall. And we pull a breaching kit out, and it's got a little extendable ladder in it, along with a hammer and crowbar and stuff for breaching. So we popped that ladder out, put it over the side wall, because there, all the streets, there's just a solid wall down the streets with gates that go into each house. So we put the ladder over the wall. I'm the first one over the wall. My very first deployment. I'm the first person over the wall, and I'm point man.
Right.
So I get over the wall. I'm out in the street by myself in the dark, and I'm just leaned against the wall, and I have my rifle up, looking down the street, just kind of scanning around. And I pull my NVGs down and flip them on, because we didn't have them on at first, because the street lights were bright enough, but now that everything was blown out, I flipped them on. Didn't see anybody, not a soul in sight, no cars, no nothing. And then I noticed at the intersection, basically at the end of that block, there was a little light flashing on the ground. And I was like, what is that? And I looked through my ACOG, and I could see just a little green light just flashing. I took my NVGs off, and I could still see it. I was just wasn't sure it wasn't something, that was it wasn't really a light, so like something flashing that my night vision was picking up. But I could see it, and this dude pops his head around the corner out from one of the walls, and he's looking at me. And I lift my rifle up, and I'm looking back at him, and he's just staring at me. I'm staring at him. I don't know what he's doing. He just leans out and just looking, and he pops back around the corner, and then he pops out again, looks at me again. And I was like, oh, go, which means stop. I was trying to sort of whisper, but loud enough where he could hear me. And he took off running. And right about that time, our platoon sergeant, he comes down there, and he was like, hey, Fortner, get up. Let's go. And I was like, hold on. And he went to take off ahead of me. And I grabbed him. I was like, hold on, Staff Sergeant. I was like, what? I said, there's a little light flashing on the ground right there. And this dude just popped out and was just staring at us, and told him to stop. And he took off running. He was like, hey, good eye. He's like, he's probably trying to lead us into an ambush. Fuck that. We're going the other way. So we went down a side alley and bypassed that area. So I think that day that maybe me noticing that little light kept us all from being, all killed at one time.
Yeah. Welcome to Iraq, right?
Yeah. So it was like, that first, it's interesting because that story is always interesting to me, because that, there's that good and bad experience with Iraqi people all at one time. You know right. What I mean? Which, yeah.
So what was your first, so you've gotten a taste of Iraq already. When was your first, when were you in a moment, or was there ever, what am I trying to get here? When did you know, oh, I am in the middle of a battle, we are in a fight?
Well, I'd say there's one. I mean, I knew that, but it really, really sunk in on this one occasion. I mean, before this, we spent some time with the Iraqi police, at the police department in Ramadi, kind of checking everything out, making sure they were doing what they were supposed to do. And they had just been lit up before we got there. So when we got there, you could tell a battle had went on. So it was obvious, okay, this is a real this is a serious battle that we're in. You know, these Iraqi police just held this place down against some pretty hardcore attacks. But they were smiling. They were happy. You know, we got there and they're giving us bread. They're playing pranks on each other and on us and joking around, and, you know, it's just whatever. But later on, we were on a mission or we went out on a patrol. And we had been told when we got there not to go out during the day, that snipers were too bad, especially foreign fighters, and don't go out during the day, you'll get messed up. Well, we were still going out during the day at this point, but once again, 7 tons dropped us off. We didn't use vehicles like I hear a lot of guys talk about. We were on foot most of the time. Trucks would take us out in the middle of the city and then drop us off. So we get out and we go into this house and say I was point, and I go in, I kick in the door, we clear the house, family's cool. So I'm headed for next thing is always head to the rooftop and get security set up on the roof. So I'm headed up the roof, and my squad leader's in front of me, and I also have the radio on my back, and he gets up onto the roof before me, and we hear boom, this loud explosion off in the distance, probably about a block or two. Well, no, it's further than that, probably 3-4 blocks. And he gets up on the radio, and I see him just stop, and he looks down the street in the direction our trucks were going, and he's like, "Hey, Fortner." And I was like, "Yes, sir." And he's like, "Get up here now, bring the radio." So I get up there, and when I look over the edge, I see the backs of some of our trucks down there, and there's just smoke and dust and this giant mushroom cloud. And machine guns are ripping and roaring like crazy down there, and you see fire coming from the rooftops down onto them and stuff. And he grabs the radio. I turn around, he grabs the radio from me, and he's talking to him. I don't remember what he said and all. And he's like, "All right, get down there. We got to get to him." And so I run down the stairs, and I don't remember ever being afraid at this point. Like, it was just like all just autopilot, you know what I mean? Just following those orders right when he gave them, I guess, you know, without really too much thought. I just knew we had to get to him, you know, like we weren't just going to leave him there.
You got a job to do. There's shit you got to do. You can't think about much else.
Right. So I run down the stairs and I was like, "Come on." And I didn't even stop running, and I bust open the door, and I just take off sprinting. And I was a good ways ahead of everybody, and they come running out behind me, and everybody's running behind me. I'm leading the charge back to these trucks to try to go save our guys. And I look back, and they're way behind me. I was way too far ahead of them, so I slowed it down a little bit so they could catch up some. I was running pretty damn fast, and so they catch up, and I get to this big open courtyard, and I stop because I was like, okay, I'm not going to run right out in the open like this. We were running along the sidewalk, you know, like underneath these overhangs of buildings and stuff. But when we come to this opening, I stop. It's like it's like a roundabout with a big fountain like in the middle. And I see our truck is over on the other side. It's probably 100 yards, I guess. It's our truck sitting over the other side. The whole front of the truck's missing. See them pulling the driver out. There's blood everywhere. They're pulling the Marines out of the Humvee. And the machine guns are lighting up the rooftops. And I see there's a car sitting over to the left, and the doors are open. These Iraqi dudes are hanging out dead. They're all ripped up from 50 cals and 240s. I was like, "Hey, Sergeant, I'm not running across this fucking open courtyard." And so I turn around and I kick in the door. I'm going to try to go through this house and go out the back and go down the back alleyway and come around behind them. Well, I kick open the door, and there's a dude standing there with an axe. And he holds the axe up like he's about to chop me. You know what I mean? And I go to lift my rifle up, and fortunately, my dude in my squad comes through a side door, and he takes off. He comes up with his rifle up, and the dude turns around and takes off running out the back door. And I didn't even have my rifle up yet. So at that time, I just turned around, went back out the door because we knew we couldn't go that way because, once again, those guys could have just led us right into an ambush. So I go back out the door and I was like, okay. So I just take off running across this courtyard right out in the open. And I just held my breath and ran as fast as I could, And that's one time I was scared because I knew there was machine gun fire coming from those rooftops, and I was running possibly right through the middle of it. And I ran and I jumped over the walls into over this this fountain, and I look over to the left and I remember jumping and I look down at this Iraqi guy that's laying there all ripped. I mean, he's all mangled laying there, and just blood everywhere. He's got a chest rig on. There's a grenade hanging on him. I see AK laying beside him. And what's crazy is in that split second, the first thing that run through my head is, what about his wife, his children, his family? That's a crazy thing, people to think about, but that's the first thing that popped into my head, and it's just what it is. And
interesting that you mentioned that's the first thing, because that's I don't know, in the folks that I've talked to in warfare and in my experience, that's not necessarily the first thing I think of. It usually comes after.
Yeah, it's strange. I don't know why that's the first thought I had, but it was. I think maybe it's because I've always, like I say, growing up, I was always just quite a quiet and empathetic person. Maybe I just could see things from every angle, every side, and put myself in other people's shoes. And I don't know. But then we got to the truck, and that when that IED went off, I guess I talked to the dude that was leading that truck just a few months ago to ask him what happened that day exactly before we got there. So I guess that he called out that IED. He saw it, and he was like, "Hey, IED," and then it went off. So it hit that truck. The truck collapsed, crushed the driver's legs to the bone, and then these dudes pulled up in that car and started lighting their trucks up. And so then they whipped the gun around and just ripped those cars apart. I think there was 2 cars with insurgents in it, and just tore them up. And then there was dudes on the rooftops too. He said there were dudes everywhere right there.
Pretty classic ambush, huh?
Yeah. So that was probably what they were going to do. Hit him with the IED, then dump mags on him and then run. That's usually how it's done. People say that's cowardly of them. It's not. That's just common sense. For a guerrilla fighter.
What works?
Yeah. So
anybody that's just let's just get muskets and stand face to face with each other. That's just dumb. There's a difference between cowardice and just being an idiot.
Yeah, people say, well, why didn't they stand and fight? Like, why would they stand and fight a platoon of Marines?
Because they're
going to get destroyed. Yeah. So I remember I ran into the truck or past the truck. They were dragging dude with his legs just kind of all mangled out into the house next to it. But I go into this house. This house was blown apart on the inside. I don't know what happened. Maybe it had been hit by a bomb before, but we went in and cleared the house. I went upstairs and cleared the upstairs by myself, which is usually not done. But so I come back down. Yeah, like I said, when we get in those things, I would just kind of just keep moving without thinking. You know what I mean, like that. And I just go through the house and do the thing, and then come back. Yeah. And if there was nobody behind me, there was nobody behind me. So I come back downstairs and I sit down on the steps, and the lead in that truck, he was one of our squad leaders. He was sitting there. I mean, he was shaking. Because when I got there, he was trying to pull dude out of the Humvee, but he was so small he couldn't pull him. And because he was real short, real skinny dude, just a real small dude. Mm-hmm. And he was sitting there shaking, had blood splattered on his face and stuff. So I lit my cigarette and I stuck it in his mouth, and just kind of patted him on top of his helmet, and he just nodded like, thanks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just put my arm around him and I lit a cigarette and I sit there and smoked with him while he sat there just gathering himself. I didn't say nothing. I just smacked him in the head and handed him a cigarette. And that probably meant a lot to him, that
Well,
later
I bet
on.
he still talks about that, honestly.
Yeah. And so we went back and I have a picture of myself. I was going to actually share it with you, but I can't now, as I'm not on my computer. But
Right.
I have a picture after we got back that day that somebody took of me. And I was standing there, and I remember we were all just so dirty, covered in like gunpowder and dust and stuff. And I remember like Harriers and stuff came down over the streets and dropped flares, and all the Iraqis run away when they see planes come down like that. But they covered us while we got out of there. Another company come and picked us up. But there's a picture of me standing there after getting off the truck, and I just looked like, I don't know, just like in a daze, but like furious. Confused, everything all at one time,
Yeah, I'll bet. That'd be an interesting picture to look at, honestly. So that's a great segue into my next question is like, so we talked about from pre-boot camp to after boot camp, from boot camp to your first, taking your first combat or your first fire to first combat. What were your thoughts afterwards? Because like I had mentioned before, it's not there's nothing during like in my case like a traumatic call, like a bad car accident, where like in the moment you cannot think about things because like people rely on you, so there's no room for any of that. But afterwards, when you got a sec, like the report's done and it's just like, oh damn, and you get a second to just stop and actually start to process all that. What was that like for you?
I remember that after that day, nobody said anything for about 2 days after that, because the dude that got his legs crushed, he was beloved by all. He was a funny dude. He was a kind-hearted dude. He was just a good guy, and never had anything negative to say about anybody. So it hit everybody really kind of hard that he had got injured so bad. And I just found out actually a few months ago that he ended up dying later on from infection in those legs a few years later.
Right.
I remember we went to the chow hall that night, and we were all still dirty. The Army guy guarding the chow hall didn't want to let us in because we were dirty. And that didn't go well for
bad
him.
Idea. Yeah, idea.
He was a pretty big dude, but my squad leader, he was like, he saw us. He's like, hey, you Marines can't come in. You need to go change your uniforms. You're dirty. And none of us said anything. We just all stood there looking at him. And my squad leader is like, you are going to get the fuck out of the way right now. and he stepped to the side, and we went in and we sat down and we ate. Nobody said a word. We didn't speak the whole time, and I was like, this dude is about to get, I was thinking at that rate, this dude's about to get killed. And so we ate, and we go over to a little MWR, and we go out back. Some dudes playing pool and stuff, but me and a couple of my buddies that were in my platoon that were there, we just went out back and sat down, and smoked, and just sat there and chilled, and I remember everybody would just look tired that night. It was like, that was about probably halfway through the deployment, and everybody just looked exhausted and just no motivation, you know what I mean? And I remember I sat down, we literally just kind of just dropped our rifles in the floor, like it was just like, whatever. Yeah, I dropped my rifle. I just kicked back. We lit cigarettes, and I was sitting there smoking. And I remember I leaned forward, and I was sitting there just looking at the ground, just kind of, just thinking about everything that had went on and everything, and thinking about my family at home, and I just wanted to go home and all this. And our corpsman, he was one of my best friends at the time, and he was like, hey man. I said, what? He's like, your hand. And I look down and I'm holding that cigarette and there's ashes flying off of it because my hand's shaking so bad. And I didn't realize it. I didn't realize that was happening. You know what I mean? And then I was like, yep. And then I just kind of, tried to not think about it and, move along. And I started shaking that day. So you kind of, and I started thinking, at that point, like, what exactly are we doing here? Sometimes these missions don't make any sense. There were, no nuclear weapons, no threat that I can see, no threat to Americans. Stuff just started to not make sense. And then I started wondering, like, why do we have friends? And there's Iraqis, like, fighting. Why are they fighting us? Why are we fighting them? What's the real story here? Like, cause none of this makes any sense. And I don't know why, like, why are Marines having to die for what, and why are Iraqi people having to die for what? What is this about? I didn't know anymore,
How long was that kind of like a pervasive thought? Did that, I think I know the answer to this because you and I have talked about this before, but did you ever get any sort of answers for like questions you had? Was that even an option?
At the time, no. I asked. I remember we were sitting on a roof one day, and same kind of thing as like my first, hearing the call to prayer and everything. And sun was going down. We had snuck into this house. We did that a lot. We'd sneak out at night and just set up Overwatch or set up like a little OP. And I'm sitting on the roof of this house, peeking out of a door, watching families just go about their daily lives, people carrying around bags of rice and people bringing groceries home, kids playing soccer in the street, people laughing, getting, and it's again, the sun's going down behind these palm trees. I'm thinking like, man, this is a beautiful place. Like, the culture is interesting here. Like, these people are so hospitable to us. Like, everybody tries to feed us everywhere we go, like the Iraqi soldiers constantly smoking the hookah and, drinking tea with them. And they're just really good people. What are we doing? So I go downstairs when it was my turn to go downstairs and rest. And I was like, told my squad leader, I was like, hey, he was sitting down by the door and I'm sitting by the door and he's looking out the door. And I sit down behind him on the steps and I was like, hey, Corporal. I said, he's like, what is it? I was like, what the fuck are we doing? He's like, what do you mean, what are we doing? We're setting up an OP in this house for the night. We're just looking for bad guys. I was like, no. I mean, like, I know that. I mean, I know what we're doing right now, but what are we doing in this country? Like, what is our goal here? And he just turned around and looked at me. He said, it doesn't matter. You're a Marine. You just do your job as a Marine. And that's all. He didn't know either. You know what I mean? He's also 20-something-year-old, he didn't know,
Right.
And I don't blame him. That wasn't really a question that he was capable of answering at the time,
Right.
But I think that was kind of goes to show, like, I don't really know that anybody could give a definite answer, because people we thought, even to this day, 9/11 is always brought up, and when talking about Iraq, it had nothing to do with it. It had absolutely nothing to do with Iraq. So it's like once all that stuff started coming together for me and realizing, hey, these people are not what we were told they were. This is not what I was expecting. Like, all these people don't actually hate us, like they don't actually hate America. What is happening?
And I've even heard stories of folks who like another friend of mine who was in Iraq and he was in the Battle of Fallujah, and he has a very different opinion because when he was just like, yeah, a lot of the people that we were fighting did evil, horrific shit, and then once all that was kind of like they were on the run, it's like they didn't let them just go home and be. He was just like, we were sent to go track him down, and he was just like, it changes the game when you're dragging a guy out of a house in front of his kids, who he dropped his gun and gave up. He's just like, that's, we're done. And like, he went and like he was tracked down and dragged out of his house in front of his kids. Like, what the hell are we, like, what do you expect from those kids? Like, what do you expect them to see? Like, that's a 6-7-year-old they don't know anything. They don't know how to process it. And they're watching their dad get dragged out of the house and arrested for no reason. In their mind, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So it makes sense why your generation was fighting and my generation was left holding the bag and was like, so we're still hunting down these people who just gave up. And it's like, yeah, it makes sense why we're hated. We're hunting down the sons of those people. At least my generation and my friends from high school who went to Afghanistan were doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
a lot of time. Oh, go ahead.
Was that your only tour in Iraq?
It was, yeah. Because I broke my ankle. We were doing a workup to go back to Iraq, and then on a Marine Expeditionary Unit, on chip to Afghanistan, back to Iraq. I think they went to Africa. They went all over the place, island hopping, so to speak. But yeah, like I spent almost every night on post with Iraqi soldiers, and a lot of them would all tell me the same thing. They'd say like, you're our friend, but you shouldn't be here. Like I don't hate you, but you shouldn't be here. This is our country. At this point, Iraq was now destabilized because of our invasion. Now they had another enemy to fight that was worse than Saddam, which is, Al Qaeda, Daesh, ISIS, all these terrorists, cells that flooded into the country. And I think they just kind of wanted us to leave and let them deal with it. And so that's one less thing that they had to worry about.
Right. So did that kind of, like you and I talked about the song Copperhead Road, about John Pettimore, did that sort of like, did that realization of like, what am I doing here? Did that follow you home too?
Oh yeah, for a long time. I mean, it still does.
I know that's a silly question, really, but like,
yeah, for a long time at first I was confused. I didn't know how to process everything. I didn't know. I tried to listen to other people that were justifying it all, and it just didn't make sense to me, and I wanted it to, but it didn't, because it didn't match the reality of what I saw on the ground. I was like, oh, well, if we didn't go,
What was the biggest disconnect in what you saw versus what you were told?
Like I said, those people over there hate our guts. If we didn't go take care of it, they would come over here. No, that's not what I saw on the ground. Like the Iraqi people had no desire to, unless if they were going to come here, they wanted to come here to be Americans. Like not.
Yeah.
Like how many people tried to get me to take their, like adopt their kids and take their sisters and their family members home, just to get them out of that environment. You know what I mean? Like take them with you to America so they can go to school and,
that sort of shit had to hit different.
Yeah. Like how many, because I made so many friends with the Iraqi army, and I always felt honored that they, felt that way about me to, in that way. But, like, man, what have we done? Like, what kind of situation has been created for these people that they want to send their kids and their family members away,
Right.
So while they stay back and fight, of course, it didn't really register with me at that time, but ISIS had already, that wasn't really a big word at that time. They were there. We didn't know, I guess we didn't really know the names or to differentiate them from anybody else, but they were there at the time, and really threatening the people a lot. And sometimes the people would turn on us or give up information because if they didn't, they'd be killed by ISIS, and especially in a place like that, like Ramadi, where, in Iraq in general, which is majority Shia, and of course that's in the Sunni triangle, but still most of the country is Shia, and then you have a majority Sunni organization like ISIS, coming in and trying to establish their rule. But none of that would have happened if we hadn't destabilized the country with our invasion, and that a lot of that stuck with me a lot. And later on, I didn't know why I was so angry. I didn't know why I would just cry randomly. I didn't know why I was trying to drown out thoughts and memories and for years. And then finally it all set in with me. I was like, okay, I feel some responsibility, some, regret in a way, like guilt. PTSD hits different people differently for different reasons. Some people it's the combat, it's seeing friends die. It wasn't that for me, which, those things were bad, but it didn't hit me in that way. The combat, like I don't care to, like, don't get me wrong. There are bad dudes in Iraq. There are Al-Qaeda and people like that and ISIS. Yeah, screw them. They deserve to die. Like, I have no problem fighting them. But a lot of the people we were fighting was just average people that didn't want us there, along with those terrorist organizations.
Right.
Screw the terrorist organizations. That doesn't bother me. I mean, it bothered me to know later on, actually, after thinking about what had happened, reading back in news and seeing how it all went back in retrospect, looking back at it, seeing how it all happened, how it all played out. I was like, okay, I finally had to accept I'm not responsible for this. Like, I was fooled. Like, I drank the Kool-Aid. I wanted to go off and fight after 9/11 like everybody else. I believed all the bull crap on the news about, Iraq and the all these weapons of mass destruction that were a threat to the United States. And I believed all that stuff. And it wasn't my fault. I was an easily influenced kid. And, I have to let that go. I have to realize that that's not my fault. That, I didn't treat anybody bad. I didn't kill any innocent people. I didn't, I treated these people respectfully and like people, unlike some Marines and some soldiers have. And I did, as I saw. So I personally have nothing I should be feeling bad for. So I have to let that go. You know what I mean? So, and that's what it took, was me realizing what was bothering me so bad. And then realizing that it wasn't really my fault,
Yeah. The why is what bothered you the most.
Yeah, it did. It bothered me for a long time. I spent years going down all kind of conspiracy theory rabbit holes and all this and that, trying to make sense of everything and staying up for days at a time, just racking my brain, trying to figure it all out, and snapping on people who I heard even mentioning anything about Iraq, it would make me mad. And, thinking, you don't know what you're talking about. Shut up. No matter which side they were on, no matter what they were saying, they were wrong.
Yeah. Just wanted to fight somebody.
Yeah. So like, I remember I went to my mom's job. She's working at a nursing home, and this nurse was talking to me, and I had all my dress blues and everything and all my medals and my ribbons and stuff, and she's like, "Oh, you just got back from Iraq?" And I said, "Yeah." She's like, "You know what they need to do?" It's like, "What?" And it's like, it's this thing you always hear people say, they need to turn that country into a parking lot, just drop a bunch of nukes on it and kill them all. And I swear I felt like tunnel vision,
Yeah.
what I mean? I started like it. And I know my fists were probably clenching. And I said, have you ever been to Iraq? And she was like, well, no. And I was like, then shut the fuck up. And my mom was like, okay, you need to go home now.
I can picture how you would say that too, because I've seen it and I've done that sort of thing too. And I've seen it in other people where it's just like, choose your words very very carefully because there's about to be something happening here, and I don't think he's got complete control of it.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, stuff like that always irritated me going forward because, yeah, that's not the Iraq I saw. That's not the Iraqi people that I saw. Yeah.
It's the same thing with any group of people, and that's why I think anybody that lumps whole groups of people together and says one thing about all of them is they're just silly. That's just a silly thing to think because it's like, oh, you want to tell me about a culture? Like, have you been there? Then what can you say about it? I'm curious. Like,
right.
Just like, not to quote Good Will Hunting, but there ain't one damn thing about you that I can't read in some book,
Yeah.
But nobody will ever get to know you.
Right. Yeah, but yeah, it took just I guess really accepting that fact that it wasn't that all wasn't my fault, to let go of it and not be so angry anymore.
Was there any particular people, mentors that helped you along the way and helped you kind of open your eyes to that sort of thing?
Yeah, I had a friend. I'm not going to say his name, but he was a I guess you could say African Arab from Sudan. He was a Marine that was after I got hurt. He was working at MCT, Marine Combat Training, and for the next 2 years, I was there after I got hurt, just working there doing logistical stuff because I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't do my job anymore because I fell 60 feet from the fast rope tower and broke my ankle, the same one that's recovering right now again. So he was from Sudan, and I found out he was in Ramadi too at the same time. I didn't know that. He was like Motor T. He was just a truck driver or whatever, but they also used him as an interpreter, which didn't work very well because his dialect was not the same as Iraqi.
Arabic is not like the other.
Yeah. It was very different. Even when I tried to speak to him in Arabic, sometimes he'd get confused because just the pronunciation would be slightly different, but enough to make a difference. Mm-hmm. And because I spent a lot of, like I said, I spent a lot of time with Iraqi people learning Arabic, learning Islam, as much as I like constantly every night on post. I was just constantly talking and picking their brains and stuff, and realized that we had a lot more in common than different, religiously as well. As much as people hate that and hate to hear that, it's still an Abrahamic religion, and it still has a lot in common, with Christianity and with Judaism. But I spent a lot of time with him. He ended up becoming probably one of my best friends still to this day. Don't know where he is now. I can't find him. I think he's still in the Marine Corps to this day. But he used to say that a lot. He used to tell me that a lot. He's like, "Hey, dude," he's like, it's not your fault, like it's, you just have to let it go. And he would always say, just pray about it, man. Just pray about it and just let it go. Just let it go. And, it helped, and I learned more about Islam and even more about the Arabic language and more, because I'm still to this day, very interested in the Middle East, and because that really just sparked my curiosity and my interest in that. Because like I said, I think a lot of things about the culture is just beautiful. And, but he was a big help. He was a big help because being that he came from an Arab-ish culture in North Africa, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And also was a Marine, and there was a lot of, he could understand every side of where I was coming from and how I felt, Yeah.
It was probably the exact right person that you needed to talk to at the time.
Yeah, probably was. And probably what really gained or what sparked my interest in all that stuff too, and even with him. And I think it caught his interest in me too, is because I said, I told him that my great grandfather is actually not blood, but my great grandmother married him, was actually a Syrian man, and all my family had been. I never met him, but turns out all my family had been around Islam and around Arab cultures too on my dad's side, and and I told my family, I told people before, it's like all I heard was nothing good about him. Like I can't. If all Muslims are so bad, then why would this devout Christian woman, marry this Muslim man?
Right.
And my whole family loved him, and still to this day talks about what a good man he was, what a devout Muslim he was, and how kind and humble he was, and he was constantly praying and constantly making sure his family was taken care of. And if they're all so bad, then why was my great grandpa Hassan is so loved and cherished?
Right. It's just like, oh, the only thing that makes sense is that we ain't so goddamn different.
Right.
It's the only thing that makes sense. So we're coming up on an hour and a half here. So one last question. If you had to talk to your younger self, or if you were talking to younger Afghanistan veterans, like from my generation, who, especially after the withdrawal, have no idea what they're doing, what they were doing there, what's going on, suffering from, the same exact things that you were. What are a few things that you'd say to somebody like that?
I don't know. I mean, like, on one hand, people take things differently and have different experiences, but I'd say if you're experiencing it from the same viewpoint as I was, feeling some guilt or feeling some confusion about what happened, I mean, just recognize, like I said, like I had to realize that, we don't always know why things happen. We don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, and it's not our fault. It's not your fault sometimes. You just, you had good intentions. And that's what I had to tell myself too. You had good intentions to fight for your country and all this, but and that's what you should hold on to, is the intention that you had. That's one thing that makes it a little better for me. It's like, I know, it's like, okay, I thought I was going to fight for freedom. I thought I was going to fight for, for Americans and for Iraqi people's freedom and stuff like that. And that wasn't the case, but that was my intention. So my intention was to do good. And, unfortunately it was all based on lies, but like I said, that's not my fault. And I can't hold myself accountable for that. And anybody else that's suffering from the same thing, it's not your fault either. You were fed the Kool-Aid along with the rest of us.
I could say the same thing, like, to my younger self, or like other civilians in my line of work. I'm a paramedic, so it's like, intention matters, just like you said. So if you do the best job that you know how to do the best job that you can, and you're there to help people, the rest doesn't really matter, because like the rest of the stuff can be unavoidable sometimes, but the intention is what matters. So, well, Josh, thanks for coming on. Oh, wait, one more thing. Go ahead.
Huh?
If you have one more thing, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, and I don't regret. If I could go back, I would do it. If I could go back, knowing what I know now, I would still go back and go again. I might do some things differently in Iraq. I might I maybe could be in. If I could go back in time, I could be even more of a asset to be able to step in between confusion and possible, collateral damage, and because there'd be somebody there that could sort of be a mediator, and you know what I'm saying? Like, understand, like, hey, these are friendly. They are not bad guys. They're trying to save
Right.
their friends, and and that's another reason I don't regret it either, is because I saw a part of the world that I would have got to see that I probably would have never saw otherwise, and it sparked my interest to learn more about world religions and to understand another culture. And now I have friends, which I've interviewed on my channel from Iraq, who about the war and stuff, and now I have connections where I'm planning a trip to go back to Ramadi as part of more of a healing thing, to see how it's been rebuilt, and see how everything is now that ISIS has been wiped out. And of course, I'll cover up I'm gonna cover up these Marine Corps tattoos and stuff, because I don't want anybody knowing I'm a Marine when I get there, because
Right.
there's still, that's still fresh in their, a lot of the adults now were kids then, and they grew up terrified of us, and there is probably still some anger in there, and but I don't regret it at all, because like I said, now I can be an advocate for peace and for people around the world just trying to understand each other a little bit better, and realize that we don't have to kill each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's for that reason I would not take it back. Yeah.
Well, it was an absolute pleasure having you on. Appreciate you having this conversation with me. Means a lot to myself and everybody that I want to spread this message to. Like we got to talk about this stuff, the good, the bad, the ugly, if we want anything like society to keep moving forward. Like we can't keep falling back. This stuff has got to be remembered, because as soon as we forget, that's when it happens again. So thank you very, very much. I was honored to talk to you.
I appreciate you having me, because I don't get to talk about this stuff very much. People don't really ask me about that stuff very much. They want to know tactics and stuff like that, which is important. But I like talking about this side of it too, because Fatty Westside has interviewed me about these parts of it as well. Because, like you said, especially the way things are going in the world right now, I want people to think about things like that have happened in the past. I don't want us to go down that road again. Go back to wars in the Middle East and to other places, and just not question our government, and just going along with it, and going and getting ourselves killed and having to kill other people for no reason. Yeah, that's a big reason that I like sharing these stories, because I don't. That stuff will happen more, of course. I'm probably not going to stop it, but if I can, every little bit counts, I guess.
And it's human nature, ain't it? Unfortunately, but hopefully at least we can a little bit more understanding. And, here's hoping that Iraq turns out a little bit like Vietnam in the near future, because that would be an amazing country to go visit one of these days.
Right. Totally.
But I'm going to cut it here. Let me know what you think of this whole conversation. If you want me to have more of this in the future, let me know in the comments section. And then go ahead and check out Josh's channel, Modern Frontiersman. Like, comment, and subscribe, engage, do all that sort of good stuff. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in.